Hey guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to make an almond apple galette. Galettes are quite interesting because it's essentially a free-form pie. It's kind of in between a pie and a tart. It looks very effortless, it looks very rustic. However, it still is a very elegant dessert that tastes absolutely delicious. So let's get started. First, let's make the pie dough. So one of the key things about making pie dough and ensuring that it comes out very flaky is for all of your ingredients to be quite cold. So I have my butter, which I have cubed, and water, which I just took out of the freezer. In a bowl, I'm quickly gonna mix together my dry ingredients. So I have some all-purpose flour here. To it, I'm gonna add some white granulated sugar. You can adjust this recipe depending on your personal preference. I kind of like my pie dough to be relatively salty, so I'm only adding a little bit of sugar, but you can add more if you would like. So in goes the sugar along with some salt. Give everything a good mix and then add in your cold cubed butter. Toss the butter in the flour until it's coated, then using a pastry cutter, which you should be able to get at any baking store. Begin cutting the butter into the flour, but be very careful about how much you actually do this. Don't cut the butter into very, very tiny bits. You still want some nice and big chunks in there before we mix in the water. Once your mixture has reached the stage where there are some small bits of butter, but also some really distinct chunks, we can add in the cold water. Your water should be very cold so that it can keep the overall temperature of this mixture super low. This way, we're going to prevent the butter from melting into the flour, and this is going to contribute to the flakiness of your final pie crust. Combine the water into the mixture as much as you can, but it will overall still be a very crumbly mixture, so don't overwork it. Cover with plastic wrap and place into the fridge to chill. I had this mixture in the fridge for 15 minutes. You can also put it in the freezer if you want to speed up that time. Just make sure you don't let it stay in there for too long or the butter will become rock hard and you won't be able to work with the mixture. So I have a cutting board here and I'm just gonna dump this mixture onto here. So this is going to be quite a crumbly mixture, but we are going to have a form of dough at the very end. Now what we're going to do is laminate this dough. Now I've never really seen people laminate pie dough before, however it is a very common thing to do within croissants or puff pastry. So it makes a ton of sense for you to laminate pie crust as well because you still want it to have a very similar texture. This step is a little complicated, so here's just an explanation to show you why you should laminate your dough. Here's your cold, crumbly mixture with the clumps of butter in it. And when you laminate the dough, you're going to flatten out those pieces of butter and fold it over itself. This creates layers of fat and flour, and when you bake it, the fat will melt, the flour will cook, resulting in a nice and flaky pastry. I hope that made sense. We're going to do it in real life now. So here you have the crumbly mixture, which should now be very cold. Then using a clean rolling pin, in a pressing motion, you want to flatten everything out. After you go back and forth, use a bench scraper and fold it over itself. Tightly press it together, then do that again. You're going to repeat this 4 times, and don't worry, it will be very crumbly at first, but after we finish laminating, it will be able to form a cohesive dough. Try to form it into a rectangular shape and press it very tightly every time. After 4 times, we're going to officially begin to laminate this dough. So flour your work surface and also the top of your dough. Roll it into a large rectangle, then fold it over itself. The dough should not overlap, it should be right in the middle. Rotate the dough 90 degrees, sprinkle the top with some more flour so nothing sticks, and do this step all over again. Don't worry if the edges are still a little bit crumbly and kind of falling apart at this point. We are going to repeat this rolling, folding, and rotating sequence 5 times in total. You do want to keep count because if you overwork the dough, the layers of butter are going to melt into the flour, and then you're going to end up losing all of your layers. I'll link in the description down below a couple of really insightful blog posts in case you want to learn more about laminating dough. Once you're done, wrap it with some plastic wrap and use your rolling pin to flatten it and make sure it's nice and compact. Now into the fridge this goes for at least 2 hours, but if you chill it overnight, that would be best. Moving on, we can work on the apple filling. I'm first going to juice an entire lemon. You want to roll this around so that it softens up the lemon, which is going to make it easier to get all of the juices out. Poke it with a fork to break up the pulp even more. Then using a lemon juicer or your hands, squeeze all of the juice out of that lemon. This lemon juice is going to prevent the apples from oxidizing. To it, I'm going to add some brown sugar and cinnamon for flavor, and mix everything until smooth. Now on to the apples. Make sure that they're all really nice and clean and dried. And I'm going to take an apple core to remove the core. If you don't have an apple core, you can also just do this with a knife. Cut the apple in half, then slice into even slices. I'm doing this by hand because I find it quite enjoyable and very therapeutic. It's also quite simple to do because you're not cutting them into very thin slices, so you don't need extreme knife skills for it. But if you want, you can also use a mandolin slicer if that's more convenient for you. After slicing every apple, you want to mix it around in that lemon juice mixture we made earlier. This is just going to prevent the apples from browning. All the apple slices are well coated inside of the lemon, sugar, and cinnamon mixture, so I'm going to pour it into a bowl with a strainer on top. I've removed the excess liquid from the bottom of this bowl so that you can have a bit of a reference and see how much more liquid there actually is inside of the apple filling that needs to be strained out of it. It's important that you do not skip this step or rush the process, because if you do not let the excess water come out of the filling, it's going to kind of pool up inside of the apple galette while it's baking and make the crust really soggy, which you do not want. So I'm going to cover this up with some plastic wrap so that the apples no longer oxidize, and set it aside while we work on the almond frangipane filling. Other than the apples as the filling for this galette, we're also going to make some frangipane, which is basically just an almond cream. It's a very popular type of filling within the world of pastry making, and it's often put inside of breads and tarts. It's very simple to make. We're just going to, in a bowl, cream together some butter and icing sugar. You want your butter to be really nice and soft. And I'm doing this by hand today, but you can also do this in a stand mixer or using a hand mixer. For flavor, pour in some pure vanilla extract and mix it till combined. Then in a separate bowl, crack in 1 egg and beat until nice and loose. We're making a very small amount of almond cream today, so we only need half an egg, which is why you want to measure this by gram to ensure a very accurate result. Don't worry, the rest of the egg is not going to waste. We're going to use it as egg wash for later. Slowly add this egg into the butter mixture and mix in small increments. It will look very clumpy at first, but it will combine into a nice and smooth mixture in the end. Once smooth, add in the all-purpose flour and give it a good mix. So finally, we can add in the almond flour, also known as almond meal or ground almonds. Gently fold that in. Once everything is combined, we can set this aside and finally begin to assemble the galette. My dough has been in the fridge for 2.5 hours. It is now really cold and firm. Try not to touch it too much unless you absolutely need to. So I have a big cutting board here, which I'm going to lightly dust with some all-purpose flour. Unwrap your dough and also lightly dust the surface of that. Then we can begin to roll it out. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, Jasma, why would you chill the dough into a square and then try to roll it out into a circle later on? I'm very aware this is not the most strategic thing to do. However, for laminating dough, we need it to be in a very uniformed structure and we need it to keep those really defined layers. So you don't want to risk losing the flakiness of the pie dough by forcing it into a circle and messing up those layers before you chill it, just to make it a little bit easier to roll later on. If you looked at what I was doing, essentially you want to flatten the corners first, then you'll have a little mound of dough in the center, roll that out, and soon you'll have a circle. I promise you it's doable. I have my pie dough rolled out to about 12 inches in diameter. You need it to be much bigger than what your actual galette is going to be because you need enough extra room to fold and close up the galette. So I have a baking tray here, and I'm gonna take my parchment paper and just slide it under my dough. If you flour the bottom well enough, that should be very easy to do. And then we can take the frangipane and apples to fill up the galette. So plop on that cream filling and spread it out with a spatula. Make sure you leave at least a couple of inches on the sides to be able to close up the galette later on. The apples have drained out all this new liquid that we didn't see before, so now we're ready to uncover this and fill the galette with our slices. The way that I like to do it is to bunch up a couple of slices so that it forms like a bundle, and then we're just going to lay this on in really whatever format you would like. I just ended up playing a fun game of Tetris with apple slices, which is very interesting. I like how the overall look is very organic and kind of flowy, but of course you can do whatever you would like. Here are just a couple of other design ideas that you can try out. Now we're ready to close up the galette. So very gently fold up those pieces of dough on the sides, and you want to ruffle it, almost like folding a dumpling, then just gently press everything together. Then using the leftover egg that we had from the frangipane, we're going to use this and brush it under those little flaps of dough. This kind of act like a glue just to keep it together. Transfer onto the baking tray and place into the freezer for 20 minutes to become super cold before baking. Do not skip this step. Once it's chilled, brush the rest of the galette with that egg wash. This is going to add lots of color and also a little bit of a shine. Then bake in an oven preheated at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 to 23 minutes. Meanwhile, I'm going to quickly toast some sliced almonds on a stove. I don't like to sprinkle this onto the galette and bake it all together because I find that some pieces will burn and overall it's just less even, so here I have more control. Once the galette is nice and puffed up and beautifully golden brown, we can take it out of the oven. Transfer it onto some sort of serving platter or plate and just sprinkle on those toasted almond slices and decorate however you'd like. That's it with this video. I really hope that you enjoy this recipe and that you can give it a try. I think this will wow all of your guests at dinner parties or family gatherings. It is a very rustic dessert, which is something I have very much grown to love. I think the little imperfections of it is what makes it much more elegant. It's a very delicious dessert, and I definitely recommend you to eat it fresh. However, if you have to store it in the fridge or you have any leftovers, try to at least let it come to room temperature or microwave for a little bit so that it can become nice and soft and flaky before you eat it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you guys next time. Bye!